Welcome to your On TV news desk. I'm here in the studio today with Joe Fratesi. Joe, how are you doing today? Doing good?
Happy to be here.
Awesome. So Joe is joining us to talk about the task force for the Huron Central Railway. Now, you guys presented to Council on Monday night, just kind of an update on what's been going on. Council passed a resolution to continue to support the initiative. So can you tell me a little bit about what was said at Council on Monday?
We're about 3 months into our work, and we're about 3 months away from D-Day, which is the end of the year.
Right.
Set by Huron Central Railway as the time at which they will no longer be able to operate if they don't get assistance from the senior levels of government.
Mm-hmm.
So we went to Council to let them know what we've been doing. Basically, just prior to the election, our task force made sure that we met with all of the candidates that were running locally.
Okay.
And we made sure that when Doug Ford and Andrea Horvath came to Sault Ste. Marie, that the question was put to them about Huron Central, and we were very fortunate to get very positive commitments from Andrea Horvath.
In the campaign.
In the campaign.
Mm-hmm.
And if I'm elected, I will support. So,
right.
We obviously have continued to use that to our advantage. But we then had a meeting of all of the stakeholders of Huron Central.
Right.
Which would be all of the communities and industries between here and Sudbury that would be seriously affected by there not being a Huron Central. We had a meeting in Sault Ste. Marie on July the 25th. We rallied the troops, as it were.
Right.
And we asked them, and have since received from all of them, very strong letters of support, resolutions if they're municipal councils that we'll use as part of our presentations. We now have had meetings with Transport Canada officials.
Okay.
And we've sort of put that one to the side as we work on the province, because I think the federal government is expected to participate, but we expect that they won't participate unless there are matching funds from the province.
Makes sense.
And there are no programs available at a provincial level at this point in time. But that's not going to stop us, because back in 2009, when we did this, there were no provincial programs then either. And
You found something?
Yeah, and I use the saying, where there's a will, there's a way. That certainly is the case with government. Relying on the commitments that we got during the election campaign, we are now following up with provincial ministries through Ross Romano,
right.
Our local member of parliament. We expect that it will be Northern Development and Mines that provides the funding, but we quite frankly don't care which ministry provides
as long as it comes.
As long as it comes, and those are our next tasks, to meet with either the Premier or who he might assign as the appropriate minister, and to solidify his commitment in terms of financing arrangements.
Now, has Transport Canada been responsive in terms of what you guys have been discussing?
Yes. Steve Butlin went in Ottawa at the AMO conference, and
right.
we had hoped to meet with a provincial minister then, but there was some mixed communication there, and that'll happen over the next week or two. But he did manage to arrange for a meeting with very senior staff members of Mark Garneau's
right.
ministry, and left there fairly encouraged that they understood, were well briefed, and are prepared to find the
take
funds.
Those next steps.
But again, the province has to be involved, and once the province shows that it's going to be involved, then the federal government will come to the table, we're convinced.
Now, the province, Ross Romano's been responsive to your requests, and he's been guiding this process along?
Yes, part of the problem with the province is that they're newly elected,
right.
and it's new jobs for all of them, whether they're the Premier, the Minister, so who exactly we will end up dealing with is not clearly known at this point in time. It's one of 3 or 4 different ministers, but we think that the Premier is going to direct that this happen in accordance with his earlier promises, and we need to get the meetings going so that part of the problem is there are 43 local employees at Huron Central, and can't wait till December 31st to know whether this is going to happen.
No, there's a lot on the line for these people.
Huron Central has to give notice to these employees sometime in October if it looks like they're closing at the end of the year. So we need over the next 4 to 5 weeks to to put this thing together in a solid way.
Now, has Premier Doug Ford offered any kinds of follow-up since he's been elected, or has all the communication been through Ross?
We've been dealing through Ross,
Right.
and effective actually today, we've sent emails directly to Doug Ford, our Premier.
Right.
And we've sent emails to the ministers that we think may be involved, giving them a sense of our urgency and getting some decisions made. So I expect I'll have some action on this, and I expect we'll have some meetings scheduled over the next week or two.
Now, I want to talk a little bit more about what our municipal elected officials have had to say about it, as well as what kind of these meetings will entail in the next few weeks. So we're going to come back after this break, and we'll talk a little bit more with Joe Fratesi about the Huron Central Railway. Stay tuned. We're back in the studio with Joe Fratesi talking about the Huron Central Railway. Now, you mentioned that you've talked to the candidates running in the municipal election as well. About the train?
Not the municipal.
Not the municipal. Oh, it was
Just
provincial.
the
Okay, I'm
yes.
sorry, I misunderstood you. But our city councillors have all thrown their support,
Absolutely. There's unequivocal support.
unanimous
from
support.
the current council, and I would be hard pressed to think that there'd be any candidate who would not support this.
Well, that's why I was going to ask. That's not really a good look for them to oppose, right?
The consequences of there not being a Huron Central operating are huge, not just to Sault Ste. Marie, but to all of those communities up the line, and I know people are interested in jobs. The town of Espanola might not survive if Huron Central closes. The town of Espanola is based on Domtar, an operation which only has access to one rail, and that's Huron Central,
Right.
to ship its products, and they are very much concerned that if this rail does not survive, they will not survive as a community.
So let's talk a little bit about the impact. So we have, not only is there the job development, there's 43 people right now that work for Huron Central. But in addition to that, there has to be some environmental impacts, economic impacts.
Fresh off of the presentation on Monday, 43 employees directly at Huron Central, 55 employees who provide services through 25
Then there's a
companies.
spin-off.
The mill and Domtar in Espanola hires 500 people. Nairn Center, which relies on the rail too, and which probably will not survive if it closes, 200 employees.
Right.
Algoma Steel, which is very supportive of Huron Central and uses them because they're very competitive, 2,500 people. The viability of our own steel plant becomes questionable.
Yeah.
The environment, if Huron Central doesn't operate, 40,000 more transports per year go on the highway. That certainly can't help our environment
No.
compared to trains.
Yeah.
The cost of doing repairs or improving highways to accommodate these 40,000 has been estimated at $10 million more a year. So you just keep building on all of these reasons why, and people say, well, this is my taxpayers' dollar. Why should my taxpayers' dollar go to a private company? Because if your taxpayers' dollars don't go to this private company, you're going to be paying more taxes to the province of Ontario to deal with pollution, to deal with highway repairs,
Right.
to deal with accidents on the highway because of the conflicts that are going to increase between traffic that carries passengers and traffic that carries cargo. So,
You know, I feel like the people I talk to about trains, you know, I've like I told you before, I've talked to CAPT a lot. I did some work with CAPT in the past, and it always kind of comes back to this, and it's really forward thinking, looking at rail travel, and you have to look beyond just the short term into the future. Right now it might seem like a lot of money to invest in this train, but in the long term we're actually doing more for our economy.
Right. And people look at rail as something that's been around for hundreds of years, and it has been, but let's forget about the nostalgia of trains, and let's look at what cities in Europe are doing, what cities in southern Ontario are doing. They're building light rail, fast trains, because you can move a lot of people or a lot of cargo faster and cheaper.
Right.
So the same applies to Huron Central. At some point in time, that line might be brought up to a standard that could see passenger rail there, but at this point in time, it's being kept to a standard that will allow for freight, cargo, to move and to get from point A to point B over a reasonable period of time, and to be very competitive with transports and to be cheaper.
So just one last question for you, specifically the funding that Huron Central needs. Will it go towards repairs, improvement? Like, is it to actually run the train, or is it to
No.
fix the tracks?
It's to fix the tracks, new rails, new ballast, a new mechanic shop in Sault Ste. Marie, and to deal with some grade crossings that are a new requirement from the federal government
Right.
because of Lac Mégantic. So
It's
all
modernization.
That's right. It's all going into the infrastructure. It's not going into anybody's profit margin.
Absolutely. All right, Joe, thank you so much for taking the time to come and chat with us about this topic. We can expect an update from you to council within the coming months?
Yeah, within the next month, for sure, we're hoping to be able to go back to council with some very positive good news.
All right, well, best of luck in your meetings, and folks, stay tuned on TV for more news coming up.